thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to speak to you here. Would have loved to be in Krakow today. Regretfully, that of course is not possible right now. And thank you also, Florin, for inviting me to speak on this conference today. I will try to request the control of the presentation. So I'd like to take you through to some of our work and the kind of teams that keep us busy. And of course, right now we're mainly working from our home offices with our whole studio in Amsterdam. But we also have offices in Shanghai and Hong Kong that we're regretfully already a little bit earlier going in lockdown than our Amsterdam office. But we found our way really well. So we were basically in March up and running really quickly. And yeah, for us, it's really good to see that our clients are also adapting to new ways of working and working online a lot. And we're also discovering a lot of new tools in that. And we do that together with our daughter company, Sense, that I will also talk a little bit about in this talk, which is a company that we founded a few years ago together with a technology investor. And we're really looking more on the digital realm, what kind of sensor technology could benefit to our built environment and what kind of concepts we could develop from there. So to take you a bit through what we are looking at the studio, and I think one of the main things that we are dealing with is the notion of course, the urbanization of the world. And I think I've seen that also coming forward in a lot of talks from other speakers over the past year. And we have a kind of big moment in the sense that there are right now more people living in urban environments than in rural environments. And it puts a lot of stress on our built environment and also the way we kind of live together on a social level. Of course, the pandemic has impact on that as well. But we also see that the urbanization, of course, is the bigger theme that we're dealing with. And it has, of course, a relation to pandemics and the health of the people living there, but also, for example, food production and economical models that sit behind it. And at UNSTUDIO, we'd like to kind of deal with these terms and develop and speculate on that. So what we're looking at is that we really want to see how design, in the broadest sense of the profession, can really kind of facilitate design solutions to help with the societal changes, but also to see how we can kind of have the built environment benefiting from technological advancements. For example, the sensor technology that I mentioned earlier. So just to give you a bit of an overview, what we call the kind of UNSTUDIO ecosystem, so the kind of work that we're dealing with. And of course, it's architecture in the kind of base profession, but we also have a forecasting department. So we do a lot of research for governments, institutions, where we're not thinking about that one building or that city aspect that needs to be there in 5 years from now, but really looking how society or certain areas could function maybe 30, 40, or 50 years ahead from now. And also what technology would impact society. So for example, we're working on concepts for Hyperloop systems, how they could be embedded in our city. Next to that, we are working a lot on energy projects as well to really facilitate the energy transition. We do that in conjunction with what we call the kind of knowledge department of UNSTUDIO, where we really have our employees being encouraged to take part in researches that are separate from our projects. And in that sense, really facilitates kind of strategic thinking within our company. And of course, we have an urban and an interior department, like really spreading over the skills of the profession. And what is quite special in our studio is that we also have a product design department. So we design furniture for multiple companies. We design light objects. We just saw a video from Zumtobel. We've designed several lights for them. We work for Alessi. And we also work on material innovations. The picture you see in the middle is a product for innovation of using flexible 3D prints as a shoe material for United Nude, a famous footwear brand in the Netherlands. So we try to tie all this together, and we tie also our staff to work across these skills. So it's very important for us that people are not stuck, our designers are not stuck to a certain typology, and they're kind of capable in moving these different realms, so we can transport also knowledge from one typology to the other. And we do that a lot by researching speculative proposals, proposals that really look in the future ahead of us, and that might be feasible in 40 years from now. So, for example, going from left to right, the first one is a study for the city of Amsterdam, where we kind of research what the impact would be of the electric car, which of course doesn't produce noise, has a lower impact on the fine dust, and what that mean for the city. And of course, it would mean that we can build closer to the roads because there's less hazard. But also we have to think on the kind of model shift in transportation, how to move from that electric car coming from outside the city, maybe to more shared means of transportation. So we proposed a kind of ring around the city of kind of transport hubs where people could change from one modality to the other, but where these parked electric cars could also really function as a battery for the city. So we can harvest the energy, but also store it on site. Kind of similar project we did for the city of The Hague, where we looked on kind of areas that are kind of not used within dense city fabrics. For example, above railroad yards, where we could also bring holistic energy concept together with the city. Not meant as a kind of project to be built in 3-4 years from now, but really meant to spark debate, to spark research, and to really point the government officials in the right direction where a city should develop to. The third one is the Hyperloop system, where we're having already a long collaboration for many years, looking at integration with our national airports, how these kind of ports could kind of blend into our cities. And it's continuous research that is happening in our studio. And the last example is where we looked at the notion of farming, not in the kind of rural areas, but really bringing that to the cities. So not so much as a kind of urban farm, really dedicated to that typology, but really looking at how we could blend that in a true mixed-use project. So instead of putting a kind of vertical farm, we put a vertical farm really in the core of the building, and we placed all the other program around it. So the farming would happen with LED lights, which has proven to be much more efficient than kind of growing the vegetables, for example, in the open air. And it's these kind of concepts that really drive us in our kind of, let's say, day-to-day projects as well. So if we look at what is kind of driving our company, there are a number of themes that we think is very important. This is a project that we completed 20 years ago. It's a bridge connecting two distinct city parts in the city of Rotterdam. And what we noticed is that this is not so much about the beauty of an object, but it's how people identify themselves living in that city with that object. And through these 20 years, this bridge has become, I would say, the symbol of that city. So if somebody would be interviewed in the city of Rotterdam, they would typically interview him with the bridge in the background. If there would be, if you would visit one of the Dutch ambassadors abroad, they would have a picture, of course, of our king and queen. But a lot of times they have a picture of the city of Rotterdam next to it because it shows the notion of prosperity and kind of innovation drive of the city. And the most strong is that we see people really identifying with that. So this is we had an exhibition on this bridge on the celebration of its 20 years existence. And we came across the most crazy objects where people depicted the bridge. And one of the most crazy ones, I would say, is the back of this captain. And for him, the bridge is not on his back because he's like an architecture fan or a design fan. But for him, the bridge is the symbol of coming home. When he with his ship basically sails back into the port of Rotterdam and he sees the bridge, that's for him the sense that he arrived at home in his home city. And he's proud of that. And I think that's so powerful if we can achieve that with design to connect city parts, but also really bring identity to people. It's a very kind of important driving force in our thinking. And that notion of identity of space is also very important in this project. This is actually the first project that I was allowed to work on as a young architect, joining DINGSTEDirectorUNSTUDIO almost 20 years ago. And it's they asked me to participate in the competition process for designing the Mercedes-Benz Museum. We won that competition. I thought that would be the life of the architect. You do a competition and you win the most amazing jobs. I've learned a lot in the last 20 years, but I think the most important discovery that we had with this project is that of course, we got a very extensive brief from Daimler, from Mercedes-Benz, and in what car should go where. And we came up with a new model of organizing the exhibition in a kind of intertwined twist, like a DNA structure, where we would have the historic timeline starting at the top of the building, going down from, let's say, the first car down to the latest prototype. And next to that, the second line of the DNA string was a helix, bringing all the collections together, which were more team-oriented. But it was not so much just about bringing this collection forward. What we did in this design is that we designed a lot of in-between spaces that were not in the program brief, spaces that would connect spaces together. Sometimes it's a tribune staircase, sometimes it's a place where you can look outside. And what we discovered is that these spaces are the most interesting to people because they're not programmed. People can use them in a way that is important for them. And that happened in this museum as well. The museum was designed to show the company collection of all their amazing cars that they have designed. But in parallel, the museum started hosting events. And currently, they're hosting more than 300 events a year next to the museum operation. So it invented a whole new business model next to the museum operation that could run flawlessly in parallel to that museum operation. So it showed us the importance of designing these in-between spaces. And a similar thing happened in this train station. I worked almost 10 years on this project with a large team in our office. And it's a train station that connects a lot of different modalities. And it does that in a very efficient way. So we designed this building not so much on, let's say, the shapes of the building, which are quite spectacular and very articulated, but actually we did it based on analysis. We looked on how people would walk from the train to the bus systems, to the trolleybus system, towards the integrated underground parking, the integrated underground bike parking. And we really kind of engineered these kind of streams to make the most optimal flow for the people. And in the space that's left over, we basically built a structure of this station, bending away from these lines of flow, but also bending away from lines of sight, which leads to a very important and easy navigation in this train station. And we did some research there, and what we found is that this train station only uses 30% of the typical wayfinding signs that you would normally come across in the stations of this size, designed for over 100,000 travelers a day. So this whole notion of engineering can lead to very spectacular architecture. I would almost claim it's one of the most functional station designs that was ever done because it's really based on how people move through space. And then the architecture is just a result of that process. So that idea of people using space, of course, also comes across a lot in the kind of vertical cities that we're working on. We're working on a large project. We won this competition about a year ago. We got zoning approval in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So things are moving. 2 high-rise towers in the city of Melbourne. And it really kind of debates and investigates the notion of how you can make vertical communities and facilitate the individual, but at the same time also making these kind of communal spaces in these towers to bind that community together. And that idea of kind of mixing kind of individuals versus community is also very important on a programmatic level. We right now have under construction 4 high-rise towers in one development in the city of Frankfurt. The project is also called 4 for that reason. And it's really trying to revive the city center of Frankfurt. For the people that know Frankfurt, it's pretty dead town in the evenings, in the weekends, because it's really a worker town, an expat town. And we infuse that with residential program. We infuse it with hotels. We are reusing existing buildings on site to really try to make kind of living quarter. So we really optimize the mix of people so we can create that activity, not just during the day, but also in the evenings and in the weekends. So we cater kind of social safety with that, but we also create a kind of new economic model on the city areas. And the notion of performance is just not on the economic aspect as well. Of course, we are looking also how we can look at that on the level of creating sustainable futures. And this is an office building that we designed in a PPS procedure. So we teamed up with a contractor, financing partner, and engineering offices to bid for this project for the government. And the government takes a 25-year lease on this building. So the building, in essence, stays in ownership of the consortium, and it changes the way of thinking of performance on buildings. And this looks like very articulated architecture, but this whole building was designed on basically two parameters. One being the wind. There was strong winds on the side, and the forest area that you see to the left is a protected nature habitat. So we should not have any negative impact on the kind of biodiversity and the flora and the fauna in this area. So we shaped this whole building in the wind tunnel. But you can also see these horizontal facade fins. They are changing in depth depending on the orientation. So they provide shade when the orientation is more south. They reflect the light really deeply into the office by their angle. So we can take big advantages of using daylight instead of artificial light. And we created this whole kind of park on top of the underground parking. So we really kind of brought more green to the area than was there on the existing site, which had four small concrete towers, office towers. And the most important, by using smart and healthy technologies, we also saw that we could increase the health of the employees. As there was an existing organization on site in buildings built in the 60s, we could really measure the sick leave. And we are, for example, providing fresh air from the floor in this building instead of throwing it in from the top. And what we found is that there's a 5% decrease in the sick leave of the staff using this building, which is a significant economical factor for the people operating these offices. And if we can connect, let's say, the health aspects, translate that into economy, then we also see that you can do different investments and different choices in the built environment. So we think that's a very important aspect to take along in our design processes. And that notion of health we also promote in the way we design the interior of our buildings. This is the interior atrium of the Booking.com campus, which we currently have under construction in the city of Amsterdam. We reached the highest point. The big bridge that you see in the middle of the picture was hung in there just a few weeks ago. And as you can see, you cannot really see where the cores are, where the lifts are. So this whole space is designed about promoting the use of staircases, crossing over by bridges, crossing floor to floor. So we really promote activity and movement in the building, and in that sense promote a healthy lifestyle for the people. So we will bring the people up to the second floor by means of a ground staircase with an escalator or alternative escalator system for the more lazy people. But from there you will only see staircases and bridges. And if you want to take the lift, of course it's possible, but you have to kind of search for it, and you have to take a bit of effort to walk over there. And by infusing it further with light and green, we really create this kind of inspiring and healthy environments. And thinking about sustainability, we also have to think on the level of the scale of the city. And like was mentioned, we work a lot on cable car projects. Right now, we just completed a design phase for a cable car system in the city of Amsterdam that we really try to promote together with people that took the initiative for this project, which surprisingly was not the government, but were citizens that said we need a fast, healthy and sustainable mobility solution to bring us across the Eye River, which is splitting the town in two. And there have been debates about bridges for a long time, and they might come, maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, big investments. And we found in working on several cable car projects that they're an excellent answer to mobility problems. We can transport up to 5,000 people per direction per hour with the high capacity systems. We can erect it in like 3 years. So that's basically bringing the kind of transportation power of a metro system just in 4 years' time. And for the people that have been working on infrastructure projects, before you build a metro line, you're typically 20, 30 years further, building tunnels, bridges, etc. So this is really bringing solutions to cities that have these kind of natural barriers. And surprisingly, we see that in South America, there's a lot of cities using these systems on a small scale, but in a very dense network, very successfully. And somehow in Europe, we still have to learn a little bit from that. But we have several projects running, and we are very supportive of this concept, because we think it's quick answers, high capacity, and as it's all electric, a very sustainable solution as well. The notion of being careful with the environment, we also try to depict in our architecture, and also to put a challenge on there. This is another building which is currently under construction. It's for the Technical University of Delft, and it will be an interfaculty building. So it will be shared between the different faculties, where they will have their students coming together, working together on projects and getting their education. And the Technical University of Delft asked us, can you give us a zero energy building? But we have one extra request. We want this to be a very open and transparent building. And what we did is design it almost like a furniture piece, and design it fully glazed. And normally that would be kind of opposing parameters, zero energy and fully glazed. But by designing it smartly with overhangs, the use of green, smart ventilation systems, full PV roof, we made this an energy delivering building. So it's not just zero energy, but it will actually deliver energy to the network. And at the same time, we keep the openness and transparency that the university is asking for, to make this an inviting kind of interfaculty, kind of almost like an open city square object where people come together, get their education, and most important, work together between the different disciplines. And that notion of zero energy, we also try to take to our high-rise projects, where we don't have a lot of roof surface available to make PV. For that, we designed ourselves a PV system, which can be integrated into facades, where you can completely change the kind of decor of the PV panel. So we could even make it look like bricks. Very smart system. It's just put on the market, but also think about holistic energy concepts. And especially on mixed-use project, we have been calculating in one of our researches that it's possible to make a zero energy high rise, which we, let's say a year ago, would not be thinking would be possible. But by smart combinations of program and technology, we think it's very feasible to achieve that, even in an economic way, just as an experiment. So the notion of kind of building new buildings, of course, is easy. And one of the challenges that was put at us a few years ago is to work with an existing structure. So what you see here is an image of a design that we made of an office building, which on the inside has the skeleton of a 1950s, 1960 building. And we just not stripped off the facade, but we really remodeled the shape of the old architecture into a new blend of building that is really fitting to current day standards. And just to show you some recent images, the building has just been delivered. It's not in use yet. They're working on the interiors fit out right now. And this building is a 1950s building that we really kind of remodeled and upgraded and made ready for another 30, 40 years to come. So we think as architects, we should always look at the possibility of kind of reinventing the past, working with existing stock of buildings and using our creativity to turn it into something new, just not putting a new skin on it, but really making new architecture out of that. So in this building, we remodeled the shapes, we closed the interior courtyard, we made an atrium out of it, we integrated PV, we'll have a BREEAM Excellence score on energy performance. So it's really possible to do that with existing buildings and really reinvent the past in that sense. So as a last project, I want to show you something completely different. It's something that we do together with our daughter company, UNSense, where we really are not working on the scale of buildings, but really working on the scale of neighborhoods. And what we're doing is for the city of Helmond, which is a town in the Netherlands, in the south part of the Netherlands. We're working on a whole new neighborhood. The area is part of the Brainport Smart District. And we developed a master plan for the city. And within that master plan, we will also develop part of that neighborhood. And the idea behind it is to really make it the kind of smartest district that we have in the Netherlands by really trying to integrate sensor technologies on many different levels of the city, on the level of the outdoor space, on the level of the green areas, but also very special on the level of the houses in a connected way. And this brings big questions and big responsibilities forward because, of course, people are very sensitive about the use of data. So this is a clip from a newspaper article. It's in Dutch. I tried to put kind of the header translation next to it. And It basically claims saying that you could live in this neighborhood for free as long as you would allow people to look into your bedroom, which of course is not the idea of this project. But the idea that we bring forward is that if we integrate sensor technology in our homes, in our cities, who's actually owning that data? What can you do with it? And right now, I think everybody, aware or not aware, is giving us away his data that he generates for free. We are using Facebook, we are using LinkedIn, we're using WhatsApp, we're using Google all the time. And these companies don't provide these services for free. They provide these services in exchange for your data, and there's big money behind it. And what we said is, in these neighborhoods, if we develop that sensor technology, it should be the people being in control of the data they generate. And as that data also kind of substitutes a value, right? The companies, the big tech companies are using that data to create value. We could also do that on a neighborhood level, but keep the people in control of that. So we made a data management board, which will be controlled by the people living in this neighborhood. And it will allow to be the kind of most connected neighborhood that is existing, at the same time with the people being in control of that. So we as designers are not part of that data management board. It's really the people that are living there. And by studying what we can do with that, we see that there's a big potential in connecting the different scales that we normally would split in the neighborhoods. It's a 150 hectare site. There will be around 1,500 units blended with business as well. So there will be office buildings as well. And we really started looking on what kind of levels we want to kind of bring these shared responsibilities. So what are the systems that we can connect, and what's the problems that we need to solve? So how do we deal with when there's heavy rain, how we store the water in the city? How can we use nature not just as a leisure component, but maybe also blend it with food production? Can we generate our own energy in this neighborhood? And can we do that in a way that it balances out on the different programs? So not just solving it on your own house, not just solving it on your kind of group of neighbors, but really looking at the total area of the master plan as one interconnected energy generation system. And of course, blend that with the right recreation facilities as well. So we do that on working on bringing innovations to all scales. So every developer and construction company that's going to build houses in this master plan will have to address a number of themes. They can pick the kind of importance of the themes in that, but they always have to make a mix of different components that for example, relate to zero energy aspects, circularity, social safety, use of data, the level of food production. And we all want to make that in an interconnected scheme so all people can benefit from that in this neighborhood. So that means we're basically working on different levels. We're designing for creating social, economic, and the environmental impact as one holistic system. And it's not just by connecting that we can have that kind of connectivity there, so we can have people really kind of living and working together, almost like in the notion of an old village where everybody would know each other needs and could take care of each other by using the technology available, but also really have impact on their lives and on their kind of economic framework of their lives. So by looking at, for example, the use of energy and water and food production, and by making that connected, we really see that we can make impact. We can make a kind of new alternative business model. So if we are focused, for example, on the notion of shared mobility, shared energy production, how we would work with food production, but also distribution in the area. And if that make these notions more shared on economy level, that basically means we can increase the kind of income that people can spend. So instead of buying that car yourself, if you would share it on a neighborhood level and you would just use it when you need it, you can save that money and spend it on something else. And if we address that on all kind of different scale levels, then we can really create a more wealthy neighborhood with people having the same income. So it sounds very kind of looking forward and almost kind of flying a bit up in the air, but this is happening right now. And we see even a lot of interest of the kind of business partners of, for example, a Philips Healthcare that is looking how they could integrate healthcare technology within this neighborhood, looking at different energy companies that want to really look at kind of making a local energy company for this neighborhood. So we see that we can really drive by the kind of collective, strong notions of energy transition, notions of circularity, but also in that making a very unique environment for the people to live. And most importantly, like I said, really make them also more wealthy by sharing. So this kind of sharing economy that sits behind it will fuel these kind of new service models and really allow them to reallocate their disposable incomes. So that notion will also stretch over to the landscape in between the houses, in between the buildings. And we want to make that a landscape that is blending from the leisure component to really on the level of food production as well, and also connected to the retail landscape. So by connecting these data, we also see again that we can reduce waste, we can reduce food being wasted because it's not being used, so we can connect that on the neighborhood level, but also involve people on the social aspect in that food production by, for example, having the kind of urban farming integrated in the concept of the neighborhood. So in that sense, we feel we can make an ecological neighborhood that can be as much as possible self-supporting. It will not only be future-proof, but also will really kind of bond people together, which is a notion we anyway see kind of strengthening over the past months in this pandemic, that people tie back to the neighborhoods again and see what the importance is of this neighborhood. So we feel with these concepts and these researches, we can really benefit the larger picture, improve the living conditions of people, not just in rural areas, but also in urban areas, because we want to really develop this as kind of scalable solutions that support kind of social, mental, and physical health, that promote inclusivity on a society level, and as such really creates a shared community. And with that notion of making systemic solutions out of it, scalable solutions, we see this really as a living lab that we can kind of strive to kind of export to different cities, to different nations, to really see how we can use the benefit of the data generation, but controlled by kind of the local communities and for the purpose of serving the local communities. So it was a bit a step aside. Thank you so much for your attention. And I hope this was interesting for you. And if there are any questions, of course, I would be more than happy to answer that.
Arjan, thank you very much. Thank you for your great presentation of what your office is designing and about the office philosophy. It's really amazing range of activities and amazing range of research. Very interesting. And I must ask, because your office is an example of
Jest godzina 16.
Absolute success. Since the small studio was established by Ben van Berkel and Caroline Bos, how many, 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah, in 1989.
It developed such a multinational office with offices in many countries and such a wide range of activities. Is it still manageable? Who is the generator of these ideas? Is it still Ben, or is it like a group?
Well, it's I would say it's both. I think of course Ben is still very active in the company together with Caroline Bos, being the original founders. And I think what it also makes us tired every now and then, but Ben comes up with new ideas all the time. And then he throws away that kind of rock forward, and we're all running behind it. But he's gathered a great bunch of people around him, and I think that he also gives these people the trust, and that allows us to develop these ideas as a collective. So it's a very open studio. It's not that Ben acts as the kind of, I would say, let's say the master artist, but he's more the kind of master inspirer and he's really bringing that forward as a kind of ambassador of the company and being engaged a lot in knowledge development and that idea of knowledge development and looking beyond the edges of architecture, I think creates a very vibrant kind of studio. And I joined the studio in around 2001. and we were around 35 people. Well, right now, I think globally we are on let's say 200, 250 people, maybe even. So it's really has been expanding, but we have been able to keep that kind of studio atmosphere. So we're not operating like a corporate architecture company. And typically we work in kind of smaller studio groups. I'm leading one of the groups, which is around 20 to 25 people. And we have lots of interaction with Ben, and at the same time we get the trust and the responsibility to manage our projects from within these teams.
Thank you very much. I just hope that our students could have seen your presentation. Very inspiring.
Well, we do a project in Warsaw.
Where you are?
We are doing a high-rise project on the European Square. And so normally we're traveling almost every 2-3 weeks to Poland. So I would be more than happy to come over to Krakow when travel allows again, and to give a lecture on your school.
Okay, that is great. I will remember your proposal, and let's keep in touch then. And I wish you success in Warsaw with your project.
Thank you so much.